Breaking news in Turkey. The military is attempting to overthrow the government of a key U.S. ally in a volatile region. Also tonight,
I saw the truck smashing a girl under.
The death toll rises in France. Among the victims, 5 Americans, including a father and son from Texas.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
This is our Western edition. Tanks have opened fire in Turkey's largest city, Istanbul, a city of 14 million. Military helicopters have opened fire in the capital city, Ankara. Late today, the military launched an attempt to overthrow the elected civilian government of Turkey, an important U.S. ally and member of NATO. The U.S. has major Air Force operations in Turkey with about 1,500 airmen there. Turkey is important in the fight against ISIS in neighboring Syria. Tonight, the Turkish president has called for citizens to fill the streets to beat back the coup. Troops have taken over the airport, television station, and bridges in Istanbul. And that is where we find Holly Williams tonight.
Well, Scott, this coup or attempted coup, because we still don't know what it is, unfolded very quickly here tonight in Turkey. Here in Istanbul, which is Turkey's biggest city, there are troops and tanks on the street. They blocked off the city's 2 main bridges and they took control of Turkish state television, although it now appears that broadcaster is back in the hands, back under the control of pro-government forces. Here in Istanbul and also in the Turkish capital, Ankara, we've repeatedly had military jets flying very low overhead. And here in Istanbul, we've repeatedly had gunfire ringing out across the city. The Turkish state news agency is reporting that the Turkish parliament has been hit by a bomb and also that a military jet has shot down a helicopter that was being used by some of the officers behind the coup. Those reports are unconfirmed at this point. Also this evening, we heard from the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, speaking over his cell phone with Turkish television. He condemned the coup and called on his supporters to take to the streets, which is what they've done, and we've already seen some violent clashes. At this point, we simply do not know who's in control of the country. And we're getting reports now from a witness that tanks have opened fire around the parliament building in the city of Ankara. Holly, what sparked this? Why now? Well, the answer to that, Scott, is really one man, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, an extraordinarily controversial figure. He is loved by his supporters, but his critics accuse him of imposing his own conservative Islamic ideas on this country and in doing so, chipping away at their democratic freedoms. Now, the US government will be worried about further instability here in Turkey, and this evening the US government has reiterated its support for Turkey's democratically elected government. But for America, and especially recently, Recep Tayyip Erdogan has at times been a very difficult ally. The military is known for being secular. Erdogan has been in power since 2003. Holly, stand by there in Istanbul. We're going to come back to you just a little bit later in the broadcast. In the meantime, Margaret Brennan is at the State Department tonight. Margaret?
Scott, well, the U.S. has been referring to this as an uprising, but frankly, American diplomats have had a hard time getting a hold of anyone inside of Erdogan's government, so they're not clear on who is in control. Now, the U.S. Embassy has confirmed shots fired in Ankara and in Istanbul, and they're warning Americans that they need to stay indoors, shelter in place. Secretary of State John Kerry did publicly call for stability. Now, keep in mind, Turkey is a NATO member, which binds the U.S. to militarily protect it. It's also a key partner in the fight against ISIS. In fact, the U.S. has about 1,500 American troops located in the south along that Syrian border at an airbase known as Incirlik, and that is where the U.S. has launched many airstrikes against ISIS in both Iraq and Syria. So that's a key priority to maintain the safety and security, and we are told right now there is no threat to those American troops, but there's increasingly concern about Erdogan's government and his authoritarian tendencies.
Margaret Brennan at the State Department for us this evening. We're going to be following and reporting the developments throughout the broadcast tonight. Now to the other big story today. One day after 84 people were killed and more than 200 injured in Nice, France, there is no clear motive for the attack. Today, the French Prime Minister said that the driver of the truck, Mohamed Boulel, was, quote, probably linked to radical Islam in one way or another, end quote. But so far, no link has been found and no terrorist group has claimed responsibility. We do know that Boulel had lost his marriage and his job before he attacked a crowd of thousands celebrating France's equivalent of the 4th of July. He entered a seaside promenade from a side street near a children's hospital. His 19-ton truck zigzagged more than a mile, barreling through the crowds. Outside the Hotel Negresco, the driver fired shots at police who fired back. The truck struck down more victims before the driver was shot dead. Elizabeth Palmer begins our coverage.
Here's the truck, a juggernaut, plowing down the boulevard. One brave man on a motorcycle tried to leap aboard and stop it, but failed. Then the police opened fire, but the truck sped away into the crowd. Witnesses say aiming to hit as many people as possible. Panicked, they ran in all directions. And in the end, Mohamed Boulel barreled on for a total of 1.5 miles before he was stopped at last by a hail of police bullets, leaving a trail of dead and dying victims. Even before the ambulances got there, ordinary citizens did their best to help. Among the dead, there were at least 10 children and teenagers. Boulel was 31 years old, born in Tunisia, but resident in France, in a first-floor apartment in this nondescript building in Nice, in the middle of a messy divorce, having recently lost his job. You can still see Mohamed Boulel's name stuck to the doorbell of the apartment where he lived, estranged from his wife and kids. He was employed as a truck driver, and he was known to the police. He had a history of violence, but they say they never saw any indication that he'd been radicalized. His neighbor, Yasmin, agrees. He stank of alcohol, even during Ramadan, she told me. It was his eyes, they scared me. This morning, police arrested Boulel's ex-wife, the neighbors protesting as she was led away. She remains in custody now as the police try to make sense of this attack, which for the French people recalls the deadly assaults in Paris last November that killed 130 people. But unlike those terrorists, Boulel wasn't well armed. In the truck, he had only one real pistol, which he used to fire at the police, but his other 3 guns were fakes, and his grenade was a dud.
Terroriste islamiste.
At a press conference this afternoon, the Paris prosecutor said he would be looking into possible links to criminal terrorist groups. But whatever the facts, another massacre in France has left fresh scars and aching grief. A little bit more light was shed on this tragedy today, Scott, when Mohamed Boulel's father gave an interview in Tunisia where he lives, and he did confirm that his son had a history of mental illness and had in fact suffered several breakdowns in the past.
Liz Palmer in Nice for us tonight. Thanks, Liz. Seth Doan spoke with people who were lucky to escape.
I saw the truck smashing a girl under, and I noticed that behind the truck there was a lot of people down on the earth.
At first, Nader El Shafi wondered if it was a terrible accident.
I kept waving to him, stop, stop, there is people under your truck. And the police started to scream and to shout. I saw him taking out his gun.
Just down the street, tourist Lawrence Olding saw the truck careening toward him.
We didn't know what to do, so we turned around as everybody else did. It got quite close to us, so I decided to jump over the wall of the promenade, landed on the concrete.
It was so close, Alain Garnier told us, the zigzagging truck struck the stroller carrying his 2-year-old granddaughter. The stroller was thrown into the air. Ava fell back onto the ground, and thankfully the truck didn't run over her. Others weren't so lucky. Surgeon Federico Solo works at a nearby children's hospital.
Yesterday there were 10 by 10 by 10 by 10, normally 1 by 1.
You just kept seeing more and more kids coming through these hospital doors.
Yeah, sure. I prefer not to think. It's not the right time.
What do you
I will think later. I'm just working. Just working.
Many here are trying to grasp exactly what happened and just how close they came to this tragedy. Scott, tonight 52 people are in critical condition. 25 remain on life support.
Seth Dohm, thanks. Well, Americans were among the dead and injured, including 3 students from the University of California at Berkeley. A 4th student, Nicholas Leslie, is missing. A father and son from Texas were killed. Omar Villafranca tells us about that.
51-year-old Sean Copeland and his 11-year-old son Brody were on a family vacation in Europe, out to see the fireworks when the truck plowed through a crowd of people in Nice. Wife and mother Kim Copeland and 2 other children survived the attack. In a statement, the family confirmed that the father and son were among the dead in last night's attack on the Bastille Day celebrations. We are heartbroken and in shock over the loss of Brody Copeland, an amazing son and brother who lit up our lives, and Sean Copeland, a wonderful husband and father. They are so loved. In their hometown of Lakeway, Texas, Sean coached youth baseball and Brody played for Hill Country Baseball Academy. Aaron Cable is the director of operations for the academy.
He's an awesome kid, yeah. I mean, everybody's crying about the whole situation, and I just think, you know, Brody's the kind of kid that would just be wanting everybody to be happy. He's just a little fireball, nothing but smiles from him at all times.
5th grade teacher Colleen Surface says Brody was excited about this summer trip with his family.
Words can't describe how I feel for his mother and his siblings. I just hope I pray for strength for them.
The Copeland family traveled through Spain and France as part of a birthday celebration. Scott, Brody's mother Kim, turns 40 on Monday.
Omar Villafranca in Lakeway for us tonight. Omar, thanks. Correspondent Jeff Pegues says that France is on the minds of those protecting next week's Republican convention.
Barricades and Jersey walls line the streets. Machines are in place to detect a potential chemical attack, and police surveillance is ramped up. Still, stopping a Nice-style copycat attack is difficult. Ron Hosko is a former assistant director of the FBI.
There's a real risk that someone who is inspired to action, whether criminal or terrorist, sees this as a success and they try to replicate it.
50,000 people will attend the convention and thousands of protesters are expected. 4,000 local police will be supplemented by thousands of federal officials. So what is this? The secure zone has been mapped out by the Secret Service to allow agents to quickly cover miles in seconds in case of a disturbance.
It's not easy.
Secret Service Director Joseph Clancy.
Plan's never finished. You have to constantly be ready to adapt, be flexible to whatever may occur.
Scott, it's about remaining vigilant. Officials say there is no specific or credible threat against the convention.
Jeff Pegues in Cleveland for us. Thank you, Jeff. The Republican presumptive nominee Donald Trump plans to introduce his running mate tomorrow, but the secret's been out since yesterday. Here's Major Garrett.
Indiana Governor Mike Pence visited Trump Tower on his first day as the billionaire's running mate.
We love our country. My family and I couldn't be more honored.
Trump announced Pence as his pick via Twitter about 11 a.m., 1 hour before Pence's deadline to formally withdraw his candidacy for a second term as governor. The announcement was delayed after the terrorist attack in France.
This is war. If you look at it, this is war coming from all different parts. And frankly, it's war, and we're dealing with people without uniforms.
Trump then suggested a beefed-up NATO military alliance take up the fight against terrorism. Previously, Trump said the failure of NATO countries to pay their military dues made the alliance obsolete.
Either they pay up, including for past deficiencies, or they have to get out.
And if it breaks up NATO, it breaks up NATO.
Newt Gingrich, a close Trump advisor and running mate finalist, said the country must consider harsh measures against American Muslims who elevate fundamentalist Islamic teachings over U.S. law.
Western civilization is in a war. We should, frankly, test every person here who is of a Muslim background, and if they believe in Sharia, they should be deported.
Hillary Clinton also said America's at war and called for a surge in intelligence gathering and stronger efforts to combat terrorist propaganda online. Scott, back to Trump. He was frustrated the Pence news leaked yesterday and wondered if someone Pence's staff might have been to blame. Curiosity mixed with anger added a bit of uncertainty, but nothing more to the running mate selection process.
Major Garrett at the Trump headquarters in Manhattan. Major, thank you. Our coverage of the Republican National Convention begins Sunday on CBS and our streaming network, CBSN. Primetime coverage begins here on Monday. Today, Congress made public 28 formerly top-secret pages from its investigation into 9/11. The pages detail suspicions at the time of links between the hijackers and the Saudi government. Though 15 hijackers were Saudis, 2 investigations have found no evidence that the Saudi government supported them. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News were recent terror attacks fueled by online hate. With these massacres, including Nice, Dallas, and Orlando, coming so rapidly now, we wondered what's changed. Well, Mark Strassman found one factor in the growth of hate online.
The night 5 police officers were gunned down in Dallas, an extremist group called the African American Defense League posted this message online: "We must kill white police officers across the country." One of the group's followers was Micah Johnson, the Dallas gunman.
People just have much more access to hate, and people also feel more emboldened to project their hate.
Orrin Siegel tracks extremist groups online.
The internet sort of breaks down some of these normal sort of codes of conduct that we have. And so in some ways we see quite a bit of a spike in hate speech because of the internet.
The internet can be a community of hate, extremist organizations with web pages looking for followers. Dylan Roof, who murdered 9 black churchgoers in Charleston last June, said the Council of Conservative Citizens, an online white supremacist group, shaped his racial views. And Tashfeen Malik, one of 2 terrorists who killed 14 people in San Bernardino, spread her radicalized views with her Facebook friends.
The most impactful type of activity online by extremists is really on social media, because social media is a whole different sort of feeling. It's an ability for you to engage with somebody, create a community, feel like you have like-minded people who are interested in you.
Siegel said the challenge comes in fighting hate speech without violating people's right to free speech.
The Simon Wiesenthal Center tracks online networks that involve extremist groups. 2 years ago, it had identified 30,000 of them and stopped counting. Scott?
Mark Strassman for us tonight, and we'll be right back. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana today, there were calls for justice at the funeral for Alton Sterling. He was shot by 2 white police officers responding to a complaint that someone had been threatened with a gun. Sterling was on the ground when he was shot. The officers say he reached for a pistol in his pocket. Sterling's death, of course, was one of the motivations for the police murders in Dallas. Well, in Plano, Texas today, hundreds of cops attended the funeral for Officer Michael Kroll. He was one of the 5 officers murdered during a protest march. Now, we'd like to correct some information on the Dallas story. Early in the investigation, a city official told us the ammunition the killer used was armor-piercing. That led us to ask Vice President Biden whether the armor-piercing ammunition should be banned. Biden said that it should. Well, now we've learned that the bullets were not the armor-piercing type. Vice President Biden's position, however, has not changed. We'll be back with more on the military coup in Turkey. Normally, this is where we feature Steve Hartman's On the Road feature, but tonight we're going to go back to Holly Williams in Istanbul. Holly, what's the latest?
Scott, there is now total uncertainty here in Turkey, which is a key US ally in the Middle East. Here in Istanbul, the military is on the street with troops and tanks. We've had military jets flying very low overhead, and we've had gunfire ringing out across the city. But we still do not know if this attempted coup has been successful. We don't know the whereabouts of the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's clearly the target of this coup. In short, we do not know who's in control of the country.
Holly Williams, thanks. That's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News, I'm Scott Pelley.